Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Edelman, and I am the owner of Joshua Tree Learning Center here in Regina, Saskatchewan. And every Tuesday at 12, we go live talking about various different topics. And today, what I wanted to address was the topic or the idea of tracking your kids with apps. So, using your cell phone, an app on your cell phone to track where your kids are. And this is something I really wanted to talk about. I'm hearing a lot more about this, um, more and more actually, and um, it's just something I wanted to bring up. I feel like this is becoming really, really common. And as well, I'm also finding anxiety in adults, anxiety in kids, all around. Anxiety seems to be a lot more common. And so what I'm hearing a lot from parents is this idea that, well, I'm tracking my kids on their phones because and finding out where they are because it makes me feel better. I want to make sure that my kids are safe. I need to know where they are and what they're doing and what they're up to. So, as a parent of three teenage girls, I can most definitely understand the worry that is involved in raising our kids today. There's so much that we don't know. So, there's the need to know as much as possible. So, when I know where my kids are, it just feels so much better. And so, what I really want to caution about, or to really think about when choosing to use apps to follow our kids or to know where they're at, there is a price to pay for that. And I think it's a pretty significant one that we really need to consider here. So, when we come from the angle of looking at anxiety or feeling really, really anxious, what we're doing is we're alleviating our own anxiety as parents because we want to know where our kids are and what they're doing and so on. The price we pay for that is that loop of worry is never going to be closed, right? Anxiety tells us in our brain that the more we know, the better things are. That's not true, right? And what it does is I think what it does, it tends to get in the way of helping our kids develop some of the skills they need to be independent, autonomous individuals in this world. So let me explain this a little bit because it is concerning to not always know where they're at. However, I'm not advocating that we don't know where our kids are at. What I'd rather see is ongoing communication and connection with our kids so that they learn to stay in contact with us in real time. Not that, oh, I know the app is tracking me, mom knows where I am, therefore I don't have to check in. No, I think what I would prefer to see is the ongoing communication between parent and child. Yes, sending a couple of text messages back and forth, through the evening. How are you doing? If you need a ride home, I'm always here to come get you, right? Letting me kind of know where you're at and who you're with, right? But not pestering, right? Giving them a sense of autonomy. And because that is really, really important. As kids kind of grow older and they separate from us, they develop that sense of autonomy and independence. So when we don't track them or when we give them the space to do that, we communicate a very strong message. And I always say we communicate more by what we don't say than what we do say. So when we give them that space, what we're sending the message, or the message that we're sending rather, is I trust that you can handle this. I trust that you have the problem solving abilities to know how to handle this. You don't need me being aware of your every move, right? And what that does is it builds an inner sense of competence. So when people have a sense of competence over their environment, anxiety comes down. So when we communicate competence, our kids start to feel competence. If we communicate that the world is a dangerous place, and I'm just so scared about you being in the world, what message does that send to our kids? It it sends kind of the message that I can't trust. I don't have a sense of competency over the environment. So we always want to be communicating to our kids that they are capable of handling situations. They are capable of problem solving. They are capable of communicating in an effective way, in a respectful way, right? So for example, if I am going to pick up my child, they have a responsibility to communicate with me as to where they're going to be and at what time, right? So they are learning some of those really important relationship skills of reciprocity instead of relying on, well, mom sees the app, she can just come get me, right? It's a game and we have to work together. And when we build those communication skills back and forth, what happens is we increase our connection with one another. And what I would really love to advocate for is connection, instead of things like tracking. Now, is it convenient? Of course it is. It is convenient to just know. Um, and I'm not against cell phone use, right? They're here to stay, and I think we need to learn how to work with them. But I also think I'm speaking only to the concept of tracking using some of these apps that I think are leading to contributing rather to some of the anxiety that I think we're experiencing in our world. Another thing I've seen more of a trend with that I really want us to think about and be aware of is the idea that it's not just parents tracking their kids, but I'm seeing a lot of kids tracking each other. And that is something that when I hear about that as an adult, and it makes me very uncomfortable because I know for myself I wouldn't want to be tracked. That feels of quite invasive to me. And so I don't know. I think when we communicate safety, if we're tracking our kids, it's not too far off that maybe do I want my teenage daughter's teenage boyfriend tracking her? I'm not so sure about that, right? That's not something that makes me very comfortable. So I feel like it impinges a little bit on freedoms and autonomy and independence. And so I'd be really careful of the message we're trying to communicate when we use tracking apps, and just, how what's the message we're sending when we're doing that. I've done some work with the White Hatter. We've had some presentations. Those of you who haven't heard of the White Hatter, they're based out of British Columbia, Canada. They're involved in law enforcement with technology, and I can't remember where I was getting to this, but they talk a lot about the importance of establishing a connection as well. And one of their rationale and what their research is showing is that the tech world is just advancing so quickly that pretty soon as parents, we're really not going to be able to keep up with the technology that would be required to track. It's just coming at us too fast. We have to get back to connecting, kind of the old-fashioned way of connecting with our kids, having conversations, talking, making plans, and trying to engage in conversation and dialogue as opposed to relying on a tech device. It's tricky because the world around us is, I mean, we're inundated with it, right? Right from when my kids were babies, right? I had them baby monitor, right? The idea that the more I know, the anxiety will come down. It's not. There comes a point where we have to learn how to cope with our own anxiety in order to provide an opportunity for teaching. So now there are circumstances, as there always are, where tracking is important. And so one area that I can think of for sure is maybe with health, right? If someone has a severe allergy or epilepsy or something like that, that might be an incident where, or an instance rather, where tracking would be appropriate, right? We need that. There's physical harm involved, potential physical harm involved. Um, the question comes up a lot with younger kids, right? Well, if they're younger, they should be tracked, right? There's different schools of thought on that. Are they ready for the demands of a phone, right? To what degree should we be tracking them and knowing what they're up to at all times? I tend to feel like if they're old enough for a phone and to manage that, I guess I wouldn't be leaving really young people under the age of 12 alone with a phone. I feel like that's very risky. So I always like to say 12 and above would be when our kids are starting to kind of they're trying to develop that autonomy and wanting to be really independent, right? Particular once they become like university students or living away at home, we should not be tracking them. That's their free will, their own life, their independence, and I believe every person on the planet deserves that autonomy and independence and freedom. So just be careful of, what kind of message this is sending. If this is something you're looking at incorporating into your home, have a family conversation about it. See what the feelings are about it, right? What are people communicating with one another about it, and see what works best for your potential situation. Every situation is different, so we do need to acknowledge that. But I just wanted to talk about it, give some extra thought to it, um, and try to bring some awareness to the idea of using apps to track our kids. I think we can trust our kids. I'm so hopeful for this generation. I feel like they're facing a very complex world that's very different than what we grew up in. And what I'm seeing is, yeah, our kids are capable. They can handle this. They know more about it than we think they do sometimes. Are they going to mess up and make mistakes? Yep, they will. And that's hard on a parent's heart. There's no doubt about it. We may not know everything, parents. That will monitor to the best of our ability, but there's times where we just have to trust that our kids are capable of handling it. We can trust our parenting. We can trust that they do know what they're doing. And when the relationship is solid and we're connected, they will come to us for help and guidance to guide them through those tough times. So, just a couple of my thoughts on the whole apps and tracking thing. If you have other questions or things you want us to talk about on Tuesdays at 12, please let me know. We're more than happy to answer some of those questions. And until next week, take care, everyone, and happy spring.